Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, November 8th, 2021. We're back live. Time for another show. Friday was pre-recorded as we were making our way up and back to New Jersey on a road trip. I explained to you this morning in this morning's kickoff post. A rare combination of events over the weekend. I, of course, traveled over all of the infrastructure that I guess we're replacing the entirety of our infrastructure. That happened over the weekend, but plenty of infrastructure interaction, I guess you could say, and between, of all places, New Jersey and Virginia, which just had their off-year elections and were the focus of everything. In fact, from Loudoun County, Virginia, which was the focus of everything and the focus of everything, in the middle of all of this, buying high-priced gasoline, which is also everybody's latest favorite complaint as well. This makes me the most informed pundit in the world. I have been on the ground buying gasoline, not 12 gallons of milk, but at least 12 gallons of gasoline. I know the price of that. That too. We missed the milk story, which is fine. We can let that slide. That's come and gone by now. The infrastructure story, although all the infrastructure I saw looked like it was in pretty decent shape. But I understand that it's collapsing underneath, and you should all be afraid to go anywhere. And like I said, Loudoun County, the focus of everything, up to New Jersey, which became less the focus of everything as the margins widened up there. But I'm the most informed pundit in the world right now, and you should be listening to everything I say. As a matter of fact, the Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. There's a guy on Twitter who knows how important it is that you listen. Kagro X, me, I've returned, says Bill, from my 3-day infrastructure inspection tour, and he can report that all the price gouging toll booth machinery is in perfect working order. That's true. I tried my best to avoid lots of the tolls. I guess one of the problems with our infrastructure is too many people are using it, and so it makes it it ends up being sometimes a little faster, but certainly no longer to take this long, circuitous, backwards western route up to New Jersey from where we are, as opposed to going up 95 and the Turnpike, et cetera, et cetera. But, everything seems to be in relatively good working order, but it'll all be replaced shortly. I think flying cars, this is what we're supposed to get from this $1 trillion infrastructure. But I assume this is it, right? I'm not certain about that. Greg knows a little bit more about what's in it, actually, because that's the sort of thing we're supposed to be reporting on. I am holding out for the flying cars until I hear otherwise, but I think that's just not, I don't know. That's just not likely to be the case. Anyway, we'll check in on that. I think we'll skip over the 12 gallons of milk story, at least for the time being, unless it's in Greg's queue, and I haven't seen that there. That's now a non-story at this point. But yeah, we do need to catch up on the fact that they decided to pass the infrastructure bill basically over what is ordinarily considered congressionally a weekend. I mean, the weekend starts on Thursday for these guys and runs through Tuesday. So, it was a little unusual to see them do that. Of course, still hanging out there is the reconciliation bill, the Build Back Better bill, the one that was supposedly paired with the infrastructure bill, and which we're supposed to now see people who are reluctant to pass the reconciliation bill join in and scratch the backs that scratched their backs with the infrastructure bill. We'll see how that goes. Historically, that kind of bargaining has not gone well, even as between Democrats, and that's who's having the bargaining problems now. Very frequently, and as a matter of fact, almost always, it ends up being the Progressive Caucus asked to bend to get out of the way of the important thing for the centrist / conservative caucus among the Democrats. And then when it comes time to fulfill the other end of the bargain, they, the coalition dissipates. All of a sudden, people can't be found. Or I was opposed to this from the beginning. Didn't you hear me? And then the whole thing kind of falls apart. And that's why the progressive wing of the Democratic caucus held out for so long. And then they did, what was probably considered by many to be the responsible and adult thing to say, all right, we have made our point. If you abandon us now, a sufficient number of people will see it for what it is and will understand you to have walked out on your part of the bargain. The infrastructure plan has to go forward, so let's do it, and then we'll give you your chance to fulfill your end of the bargain, and everyone will watch and see how well you do with it. And that's kind of the part we're in now. And I don't know. I guess I'm primed for disappointment, but I've got room left to be shocked and surprised. You would think that a lot of these members would love to surprise everybody. There is something about the possibility of surprising people that might be very attractive. I will throw that out there. I don't know that it's going to work for Manchin, Sinema, and some of the others, but looks like we lost our call here. We had Greg, but I didn't say good morning, so he hung up on me. So that's next. When he calls back, I'll definitely say good morning. All right, here it is, I guess. Oh, wait, I have to get rid of the quality of the call question. All right, we'll just start right away. Good morning, Greg, so you don't get frustrated and hang up on me this time. Good morning. How are you?
Hey, good morning.
Were you unsure about whether you were connected? Or did
no,
you just hit the
what
wrong
happens
button?
is I have the iTunes, which is now music, playing in the background, so I have the internet feed, so I could hear your intro.
Oh.
And then I'm working on Skype, sending you stuff.
Right.
And now that it's time to call in, I call in on Skype, and I go to turn off the internet feed, so I don't hear your voice twice, once on this telephone call or equivalent to a telephone call, and the other on the music feed from iTunes. And every time I go to turn off the music feed on iTunes, Skype shuts off. Because for whatever reason, Skype has decided it's dominant.
If you're shutting off, I'm shutting off.
Right, so I have a little mini player in the bottom, and I turn off the mini player, which brings up the big screen, and I just close the big screen, figuring I'll then go back to Skype, and in fact, what I've done is shut off Skype.
Well, okay. No harm.
So for those of you following along at home, I pushed the wrong button.
All right. Is that in the infrastructure bill? Any room
it's
for
in the
repairing
yeah.
that?
Well, no, but it's in reconciliation because we got to get along on this.
Well, that's good. I was going to just say that there is room out there for Manchin or Sinema to say, I'm a reasonable person. Yeah, see, I voted for the thing after all. I don't know if they're really going to take that opportunity, but it's out there.
Well, I think they will. But see, what's going to happen?
So.
I mean, and I think that this is where your expertise comes in here, right? If you're old like me, you remember that what would happen is the House would pass something, the Senate would pass something similar but not exactly the same.
Oh yeah.
And then it would have to go to some sort of committee to sort of figure out what was really happening, and then it would go back to each chamber for a vote, something along those lines. A
committee in which they would confer with one another in a conference, and then then they would come out with a narrowly tailored bill that just addressed the differences between the two and fixed it. The conference report, right?
Yeah. So in the old days, that's how it happened. In the days of I'm just the bill. That's how it would go. Nowadays, what happens is that the House and Senate look at each other as the enemy, as they always do, and try to tailor a bill that the other chamber will accept so that they don't have to do that. And so that's what happened basically with infrastructure. There was no conference committee that figured out what was going on. They just, figured out what was going on. And in many cases, which is why the House hates the Senate, what happens is the House does something, and then the Senate does something else, and then sends it to the House and says, take it or eat it.
Right.
And the House eats it.
Yeah, frequently.
And that's what happens, And then they have some weird mechanism for attaching the Senate bill as a amendment to the last line on some other bill, and then however they do it, they skip the conference part.
Yes, they don't like them anymore for some reason, but...
okay, so now what happens is they're trying to do that with infrastructure. Okay, that works. They're thinking about it with reconciliation, and Manchin and Sinema are being so stubborn that finally the House gives up, but in the sense that and again, this is the part that's underappreciated. John Harwood had a lovely piece about it on CNN, which talks about the fact that when the House passed bipartisan infrastructure bill, Jayapal actually was playing the adult part of working on reconciliation to the point where the concerns of the moderates were covered, the concerns of the progressives were covered, and she got it to the point where virtually everybody, except for I think 6 of the Democrats, progressives, voted for the bilateral structure that happened over the congressional weekend that normally doesn't happen.
Right.
And the reason that 6 no votes from the squad and others was not enough to tank the bill is because 13 Republicans voted for it. And by my count, I was going through it manually because I didn't see anybody post this, so I could be wrong. But I counted up 7 problem solver Republicans who actually solved the problem and voted for the infrastructure bill.
Well, that's something.
Out of 13.
They have 7 of the 13
Republican
were
votes for it, and 7 of the 13 were problem solvers.
I was wondering how many problem solvers are there, and how many weren't there. But
it's about 30, and a lot of them are on the Democratic side.
Oh, okay. No, I meant, I should count up. I'll look at that. That's interesting because that's a great peek at. We normally think that they're wasting their time.
Right. Here's the one time they didn't, which of course does not mean that they're going to be there for reconciliation.
No, that's different.
That's an anti-Republican bill in their mind, and they're simply not going to do it. So that's a different issue altogether. But those 6 who didn't vote for it will vote for it because that's their baby.
Yeah, that's the one they wanted. That's the
last one they wanted.
6.
So that's the politics of it. So in that sense, Jayapal and Pelosi, with the help of the Congressional Black Caucus and a little bit of nudge from Biden, got this done and got it over the finish line.
All right. Yeah, I mean, passing it at all is a major accomplishment.
In this day and age, in these parlous times, with a bare majority and knowing that you're going to lose 6 votes. Now, were those 6 votes there if Pelosi needed them? Unclear. Usually you say, okay, well, what happens is the brilliant speaker said, okay, you 6 can vote against it, and then you have your time to go back to your constituency and say, okay, I did what you told me to do. And that's often the case. And in this situation might have been a little bit of that as well. But the flip side of that is that it is unclear that those votes were going to be there if Pelosi had to do it on Democratic votes alone. So she got 13 Republican votes because in their own constituency, and Jeff Van Drew is a great example in New Jersey, Democrat turncoat that turned Republican that isn't in the problem solvers caucus who voted yes because there's going to be infrastructure and his district is going to benefit from it. Yeah. So there were, the people who weren't in the problem solvers, the moderates, who did vote for it, voted for it because they figured it was in their best interest, as members of Congress are wont to do. They rarely vote in the interest of the country. They vote in their own interests. And again, that's the background. So when you're looking at what Pelosi did, which, I continue to think that she's like amazing and nobody else could have done this, not the people who were running against her who wanted to be speaker this time around, is that she got pretty much everybody on board with difficulty because everybody had their issues. And part of the issues was trying to figure out how to do reconciliation in a way that matched what they did with infrastructure, but they couldn't because Manchin and Sinema basically wouldn't let them.
Yeah. Well, it was well done and well managed, and
well, how's that for a summary? Did I get any of that wrong?
I don't know, probably.
I mean, and why isn't the conference part of this at all? It just isn't. I'm not sure why, but they just don't do that anymore.
Well, the initial reluctance to go to conference on things actually stemmed from another problem of the filibuster. Conference reports are debatable and can be filibustered, and originally when Democrats ran both but were facing the increased numbers of Republican filibusters and threats of filibusters, they dropped the conference part of the process so that there were fewer cloture votes that they had to manage.
There you have it. So now I have my answer. So that's why they didn't do it this time because, by the way, filibuster's still an issue.
Yeah, for this one. For reconciliation, it's not, but that's so people who would otherwise filibuster things have to stand up and fight about it in the earlier stages. But this does seem to have been
can reconciliation go to a conference?
Yeah, it can.
So, see, the thing is, when we're looking at the reconciliation bill, it's not going to go the way of the bilateral infrastructure bill because there isn't the agreement on both sides know exactly what the other chamber's going to do. So the House tried that and was frustrated because it couldn't get done because of Manchin and Sinema. So basically what Jayapal and Pelosi set up here with Biden is, okay, the House is now going to vote on whatever they want, and the Senate's going to vote on their version. And then what? Does it go to conference, or does the Senate send over what Manchin and Sinema will accept and the House eats it? That's the question on the table right now.
Well, right. And when it usually goes the way the Senate wants it because the senators often send it over with, if not a threat, then at least appended with the note that says, if you change it, I'm afraid there might be a filibuster. So don't change it.
But it's reconciliation.
Right. Yeah. Now right. So in this case, there can't be one, and then instead it's a note that says, if you change it, I'm afraid we'll lose.
Manchin and Sinema won't vote,
which is the same thing as saying filibuster. Right. You can't have it if you change it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's why because I said, in theory, this difference between the Senate Democrats and the House Democrats on what should be in reconciliation could go to conference. I said that on Twitter, and somebody said to me, "You must be new here."
Oh,
no. I mean, it could because it's reconciliation, and so therefore it's a little different. It won't, but it could.
Yeah,
and that's I guess your explanation is why it generally doesn't these days. But since it's reconciliation, filibuster has nothing to do with it. Manchin and Sinema has everything to do with it. That still could go to conference and get worked out, in the sense that you have to work out the two. Either the House has to change what they did and vote with the Senate, or they have to vote on a conference change. One way or the other, the House is going to have to eat it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Usually the case. The dynamic is
you're not going to change Manchin and Sinema.
That's why
they have the upper hand here.
Yeah. And they're enjoying it, and that's it.
And that's it. And so therefore you have a very good explanation of why the House hates the Senate.
Yeah, that's largely it. They are always feeling like we're supposed to have, an equal say in the way legislation goes, but you guys keep relying on the filibuster and saying we have to deal with, the 60 vote threshold. 60% of the body has to vote for this thing just to move forward. And you don't, so we have it tougher. So you have to, anything we can get through, you can get through. So just do it.
Right, and we have it tougher in the sense that you keep making us take these tough votes for our party, which may or may not play well in our district, and then you go screw us by saying, we're not going to do that.
Exactly.
And then I have my vote, and then they go and run against me with commercials saying, you voted for this thing that never happened, but you wanted to, so everybody in your district should hate you. And you set it up that I had to do that, so I hate the Senate.
Yeah. I think that encapsulates it nicely.
So what's in the actual bill? We'll talk about the infrastructure bill first, and then we'll talk about reconciliation, because there's some pretty darn good stuff that's in both bills, even if reconciliation doesn't happen the way you'd like it to. But we're going to be working on what the Rules Committee said was in it.
That's what really matters.
And so, that's at least the current iteration. So what's in the bill, and what would it fund from CNN? Funding for roads and bridges. This is obviously the infrastructure part of it. $110 billion for roads, bridges, and major infrastructure projects, less than the $159 billion that Biden initially requested. There's going to be a lot of less than initially, but that's not the point. The point is what's in it. $40 billion for bridge repair, replacement, and rehab, which is great for Connecticut because our bridges have fallen apart. This would be the single largest dedicated bridge investment since the construction of the interstate highway system, which started in the 50s. You can also read that as jobs.
Yes, or going back to the 50s, which conservatives love. So vote for
money for transit and rail. The package would provide $39 billion to modernize public transit. Okay, broadband. $65 billion investment improving the nation's broadband infrastructure. And again, in every single case with the CNN article, it's, well, Biden wanted more, but this is what they got. How much he wanted more is irrelevant at this point. It's nice for the record, but it's otherwise irrelevant.
All right.
Upgrading airports, ports, and waterways. And then this is the big thing because it's new. Other bills have proposed this or tried to do this or done this at a smaller, amount of money. Electric vehicles. The bill would provide $7.5 billion for zero and low emission buses and ferries, aiming to deliver thousands of electric school buses to districts across the country. And another $7.5 billion would go to building a nationwide network of plug-in electric vehicle chargers, according to the bill text. Then it has improving power and waterways and environmental remediation. Get the lead out.
Yes. Okay.
Right. That electric vehicle thing, though, again, interesting how that might work because it's unclear to me. Okay. This passed. So this isn't arguments about, what happens if it changes when it passed. Right. So there's $15 billion.
I'll take it. Give it to me.
For electric vehicles.
I'll cover it. Don't worry about
That'll help the environment and it's good for jobs. And then half of that is going to building charger stations because as a practical matter, if you can't charge your electric vehicle, you're not using it.
Right. That's true.
Okay.
Yes.
So you got this money from the feds.
Bottom line.
And presumably it goes to the states.
Me.
How?
I'll get it.
Does it go as block grants or
PayPal.
are the feds going to have federal stations?
Yeah, right.
Does it go?
There's not going to be any federal plug-in
Does it go
stations.
to individual companies so that Walmart can have an electric station in their parking lot, like some of them have
they do have
gas stations?
Oh,
how does it work?
I see. I have been in places where, like, our local mall has, electric plug-in stations. I don't know who owns
But the mall
them,
is a private entity.
Right. I don't know who owns the thing. Maybe they do. Maybe somebody else built it. It's a public-private partnership. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm saying, so how does it
question.
work? And then do this a little bit further. Let's say it works as many federal programs do to satisfy Republicans. It's done as a block grant.
Yes. All right.
Okay.
Sure.
So let's say it goes to Kristi Noem State or Florida.
Yeah.
So what do they do with the money?
I guess somebody starts a electric charger building company who's a friend of the governor and says, I'll build
what
them.
if they say, no, we don't want the money. This is democratic socialism.
Oh. Well, I don't know.
It's a block grant. I mean, it's not like Medicaid where you're going to get X amount of money based on the number of people signed up.
You would say, why don't you take the money?
If Florida refuses it, that money's going to Virginia.
Does it? I don't know. Maybe.
Well, it's X amount of money, and it's got to be spent. And if only 40 states want it, I would think the 40 would divvy it up. So by owning the libs, you're just sending more money to liberal states.
It could be. I mean, I guess that's the way they could work it out. I think, what may be happening here is they say, well, we have this pot of money, and we'll now throw this to the Department of Transportation to design the actual distribution program. And it might be wise for whoever gets the job to say, it can't be that the money just sits in your bank account and you don't build any stations. If you haven't, come up with a plan by X date, you lose the money and it goes back to states that need it. You could write it that way.
We don't know, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
it's
Maybe
interesting that I don't know that
that's
specified in the bill. And what do you do when you pass something like that, but then you have to still figure it out? Does that just go in the Federal Register or is it up to the agencies? How does that part work? And again, for full disclosure here, I don't want people at home thinking I'm smart enough to think of these questions. These are some of the things that the environmental experts that I talk to are asking themselves and everybody else because, nobody seems to be really sure of this just yet.
We could track it down. Second half of the show, I'll read you the bill. We'll figure it out.
That'll happen, right? So then you'll
How many
know.
pages?
But
What could it be? 1,000
that's why
pages? Come on.
Again, everybody makes fun of Pelosi, but it happens to be true. Sometimes you don't know what's in the bill until you read the bill and pass the bill.
Yeah, I mean, yes, there are
Because the
last-minute
details
additions.
matter.
Sometimes you read it and pass it, and still you don't know, really.
And this might be one of those cases where you have the EV money, and then what do you do with it?
Yeah.
And because that's so
a good point.
transformative, that's one of the reasons I'm honing on that particular part. I did that on Twitter, and somebody said, well, you're not giving credit to the taking the lead out. Well, I am, but I just happen to be focusing on this at the moment because this is new.
The lead pipe
Yeah.
stuff. Okay, I thought you were back on the gasoline, like the lead. No, the lead's been out of the gasoline for a while. Not everywhere, but okay.
Yeah, but that's part of infrastructure.
Lead pipes. Right, yes, true.
The bill would provide $21 billion to clean up Superfund and brownfield sites, reclaim abandoned mine land, and cap orphaned gas wells, according to the White House.
Okay.
So there's a lot in this bill, and I sort of get angry, not angry, annoyed.
You sound angry.
When people say, well, what a waste of time passing this bill. It means nothing. We have to go on to the other one. And no, actually, there's quite a lot in this bill. It's just, this is a physical infrastructure bill, and the other one is a social people bill. They're different. They're complementary. And the reason that they were set up this way is because this allows, for example, 13 Democrats, including 7 problem solvers, to vote for some of this stuff, whereas if you included Build Back Better in it, they wouldn't have voted for it and it wouldn't have passed.
Yes.
Just a reminder how we got to where we are.
Okay. Well, I can appreciate that. I hope everyone else can as well. Well, yeah, I might have to spend some time trying to fish through this. Now, I really would like to answer that question, and it can only come from reading the provision about the electric vehicle chargers. It probably says something in there about at least which agency they'll charge with no pun intended, charge with the job of deciding how will we actually do this. They can do that, and they very frequently do. Say, well, we've decided on a top line number of dollars that we're going to put towards this. How will we put it towards this? It's not actually our problem. We can just say the Department of Transportation or some other department. I mean, if you want to make it Health and Human Services, go for it. They'll take care of it, and they'll come back to us with regulations, and then the money will be passed out according to that, unless we repeal it somehow. So I'm sure there's instructions somewhere. We should probably go find them, but Well,
regulation story after the break.
Okay, we'll do that.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I haven't found the interesting part yet, but, well, actually what's really interesting is if you just read sort of through the table, almost the table of contents, it's not really called that, but how the bill is divided up, and all the different sections have titles, and they tell you what's in it, and, well, for one thing, that's a great way to find out what's in it, even if you don't find out every detail, but also some things that even the little fact sheets that people will pass out. All right, you want to know what's in the bill? Here's what's in the bill. And even if it's a 5-10 page fact sheet, there's still things in here that you say, what? What is that? How did that get in here? Or, oh my gosh, there's so much that they have to deal with. I'm scanning here. Section 22209, Amtrak smoking policy. There's something in there about it. I don't imagine it's any sort of allocation of funds for it, but somebody thought that was important enough to put in.
Well, if the rules say very clearly, if you're on fire and smoking, you are not allowed in the quiet car.
that may very well be it.
Because if you're in the quiet car, people can't say, "Oh, you're on fire."
Yeah.
Don't say that. It's a quiet car.
So, right, I'm on fire. Is permissible or still? I don't know. We'll find out. But there's a lot in here, obviously, and there's a truck leasing task force. I bet you didn't know there was one of those.
Yeah, maybe we'll talk more about it tomorrow or Wednesday.
Or maybe never, ever again.
Wednesday, because I'll be back to remind you that we were going to do this.
All right, very good. But yeah, we might be able to parse through this and at least find the section within the week or so. And,
so let me give you an example at the federal level.
All right. I'm
of where laws are laws, rules are rules, and regulations are regulations, and how it's done means everything.
All right.
All right. And this comes from a piece by Matt Ford in the New Republic, which is really rather interesting when you think about it. Title is, Biden's vaccine mandate isn't really a vaccine mandate.
Well, great. What's the problem?
Well, here, the new OSHA pandemic regulations that just dropped are a work of semantic art with a conservative Supreme Court in mind. In nearly every statement other than Biden's, and in many news reports in the matter, OSHA rule was described as a vaccine mandate, but that's not correct. The new rule is better understood as a testing mandate with a vaccine exception.
This is going to be good, I think. Yeah.
Right? And that distinction could be crucial as it works its way through courts of law and public opinion. Right. What did they do? The agency unveiled what is known as an Emergency Temporary Standard, or ETS, on COVID-19 vaccination and testing for most companies with more than 100 workers. It's roughly 490 pages long, with fewer than 24 pages dedicated to the rule itself and the rest devoted to justification. It requires eligible companies to do a few things to make vaccinations easier, provide paid time off so workers can get vaccinated and recover, maintain lists of which workers have already been vaccinated, establish a notification system, and generally requires employers to tell unvaccinated employees to wear masks.
Okay.
So that's generally what it does. But what the agency will not be doing is forcing anybody to get a vaccine, at least directly. According to OSHA, the ETS, the emergency thing there, temporary emergency standard, whatever, requires companies to develop, implement, and enforce a mandatory COVID-19 vaccination policy. But, and this is a big but, there's a pretty clear way around this. The affected companies can forego vaccine mandates if they instead establish and enforce a policy allowing employees to elect to get vaccinated or to undergo testing.
Right.
Right, and it might sound like a meaningless distinction for some workers who may now be compelled to get vaccinated either way, but there's a difference between a mandate imposed by the government and one imposed by a company.
Yes.
So if the government tells you need a policy and the company comes up with a policy, well, it's the company that did it.
Yeah. Well, they only had to do it because, yeah, that's right.
Right, and while OSHA claimed in the rule that it, quote, may well have the authority to impose a vaccination mandate, end quote, itself, and this is important because of what the Fifth Circuit just did.
Yeah.
The agency said it instead decided against pursuing a strict vaccination requirement in favor of a rule that would strongly encourage vaccines. OSHA's traditional practice when including medical procedures, such as medical surveillance testing and vaccinations, and its health standards has been to require the employer to make the medical procedure available, and has viewed mandating the procedures as a measure to avoid, if possible. Important because the Fifth Circuit just decided the government overstepped its bounds by mandating vaccines, but that's not what they did.
Right. But that doesn't stop.
But that's the Fifth Circuit, that's not what they did. So that's important when it goes to appeal, because whatever the Fifth Circuit does, you got to appeal it.
It reminds me of Scalia, saying, I'm against the Affordable Care Act because, you could have a broccoli mandate in it, but it doesn't have one, so what are you talking about? But generally, for a long time they objected to stuff that wasn't in here. Or the Cornhusker kickback is in it. No, it isn't. But I heard on Rush Limbaugh that it was, and so Supreme Court thingy here, poof. Right? Yeah, they sometimes have no idea what they're actually ruling against because they haven't read it.
And by the way, that's what Biden means when he says it's not a mandate, it's a requirement.
Yeah.
That sounds like the same thing. It's not the same thing.
It does sound like
the requirement is that you come up with a policy.
But you can see there are different letters here. Why aren't you reading? Yeah. Interesting. Well, that's very clever. We'll see how it goes. I mean, you can do whatever the hell you want in the Supreme Court, so whatever, but sometimes they get embarrassed about things, and this might be a place where that works.
Well, again, so the difference between this and what Congress does, of course, is that this is the executive branch, But the executive branch itself plays the same games about how do we write it. And we have to make sure that whatever we're doing passes muster with the Supreme Court these days because, like you said, they can do whatever they want.
Right.
So they're well aware of that. And they're not just going ahead and passing things that are going to be struck down. Sometimes they're struck down anyway, despite their, crafting it. But again, the Congress version of that is trying to get something about immigration into reconciliation, crafting it carefully, trying to use the words as carefully as possible, and then just having it struck down in a birdbath because the parliamentarian said, no, you can't do that. Because they can do whatever they want. Yeah. Yes, you could overrule them, but not without the vote, so that doesn't count.
Right. At least not for now.
Not for now. So, again, all interesting stuff, people trying to do the right thing. And that's going to lead me to my next segment, which is, I think, worthwhile to spend just a little bit of time about thermostatic response, which, of course, is relevant for the last election that we had. And then if we have time, we'll talk a little bit about what's in reconciliation.
Okay. Things have gone a little bit fuzzy there. Have you moved around or knocked the plug loose or anything by any chance?
Not that I know. I don't think I've done anything.
Could just be bad infrastructure. But so far we can still hear you and make out what you're saying. It's not having a problem with that. It's not great sound.
Should I call back?
Yeah, let's try that. If you can do it real quick. Now I'm afraid
Sure.
We'll lose you forever, though. I probably shouldn't have let him do that. Now that I'm thinking about it, okay. Well, I don't know. Something went fuzzy, and it could just be a bad connection. Let's hope that this is a good one. Let's try it.
So how did that work?
Oh my God, that did it. I believe that works. Okay, good. Now we deserve to hear you, clearly.
Okay, good. So this is from a piece written about a year ago called "Beyond Thermostatic Response," and it talks about what exactly that is. And they argue the most robust model of public opinion change is what's called the thermostatic model, which holds that survey responses, and you might even add voter responses when you vote, are signals to political elites to adjust the positions in a particular direction, typically away from the dominant view of the party in power.
All right.
For example, surveys will ask things like, how concerned are you about X?
Right.
How concerned are you about environment?
A lot.
Right? How concerned are you about guns?
That too. Also a lot.
Okay.
All right.
So, are you very concerned?
So far, so good. Yes.
Typically, very concerned simply means whatever your favorite politician is, or your not favorite politician, but whoever's in power, aren't concerned enough. However you define enough, even if enough is almost nothing.
Okay, right. So I'm
whatever
doing
it is,
the work for you.
I'm concerned because politicians aren't.
Yeah, or I feel like they can't get where I want them to be. Okay.
Right. Okay.
Sure.
So typically that means that if a Republican is in power, Democrats are very concerned about the issues that matter to them because they figure those Republican politicians don't care at all.
Yeah.
Then you elect a Democrat.
Okay.
And the Democratic responders to these surveys feel a little better about it because now you have politicians who are in office who feel a little bit closer to where you are. So your concern level drops. Did your commitment to those issues change in any way, shape, or form? No.
Okay.
But when you're responding to surveys or responding with your vote, the thing that motivates you has changed based on who you perceive is in office. And if you have people in office who you perceive as not being responsive to how you feel, then you become more concerned. And how you take out that concern depends upon what the vehicle is. If it's a survey, you're going to say, I'm very concerned and I don't like the track we're on. And if it's an election, you're going to vote for somebody else or stay home.
Okay, I understand that. This seems right.
So that means that because that's how it works, if you look at Virginia and New Jersey elections, which are off your governor high-profile elections, generally whoever wins the White House the next year, that party loses.
Right, that explains
because their voters their voters are less concerned and the other voters are more concerned and therefore more motivated.
Yeah.
And it happens all the time, and every single time for like the last 40 years, it's 12 or last 20 years, 11 out of 12 times, the Virginia governor is the party opposite to the one that's in the White House.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, okay. It's a similar dynamic to what they say about midterms, is the party in the White House tends to lose seats in Congress.
Right. And it's
reason.
Not invariable, but it's pretty strong.
Yeah.
And that's why people are saying, well, Democrats are pretty much in trouble in the midterms. But that's not the same thing as, oh my gosh, look how they tanked on last week.
Mm-hmm. All right.
In fact, last week was pretty much what you'd expect.
Yeah. I mean, as it turns out,
right? And if it's pretty much what you expect, it's not all that different. And if it's not all that different, why is your hair on fire about it?
Oh. There's nothing else to light your hair on fire about.
Well,
my hair must
I am
be
reminded, and I was having this other conversation with some of my doctor friends about this. When I started my internship in New York City in the emergency room,
all right,
the first thing they did is give all the interns a T-shirt, and the T-shirt said, "If all else fails, lower your expectations."
Okay.
Right, and so part of the problem with the election was that the Democrats lost, and that has important ramifications that can't just be explained away. But part of the problem is the expectation was that, I don't know what. I mean, in the case of Virginia, the polls said it was going to be a 1 or 2 point race. It was a 2-point race.
Yeah, I guess, well,
the polls said that Youngkin had made gains and he well could win. He won.
Yeah.
So what was the expectation there? Well, McAuliffe was going to win because it's a blue state.
Yeah, I think
that was only if you're not paying attention to what's going on here.
Yeah, the historical trend, true. But, yeah, I mean, of course, people had been fed a different historical trend the whole time. Look at the blue vote versus the red vote in Virginia. So
especially Northern Virginia, where, the population is. Mm-hmm. And sure, the rest of Virginia is going to turn out, but Northern Virginia turning out should match that. And it did. Yeah. It matched it. Yeah. It didn't exceed it. It matched it.
Yeah.
And so, again, you could take the Virginia thing every sort of which way, but one of the reasonable ways to take it is the turnout was pretty high in red areas because of this thermostatic response to having Biden and a Democrat Northam in the White House and the Virginia governor's mansion. Plus, the people who didn't like the monuments coming down are pretty upset about that, and so they're going to turn out. And on the Democratic side, a little bit less angst and harder to motivate them because from that thermostatic response, their politicians are in power, so they're a little less juiced up about what's going on here. There's a difference between, well, what will happen if we lose versus what has happened over the past year or so. And with our people in power, we're happier about the way things are than we would have been if there are Republicans in those situations. So we're not as thermostatically motivated. And so we didn't show up at the same numbers. And that's the turnout part of it. But there were vote switchers. CNN famously interviewed some white suburban women in Virginia who said it's really not about critical race theory at all. It's about the fact that we're really upset that the Virginia schools have been closed for this long, and we don't really seem to have a policy. And then one of them was reported to say something along the lines of, and that there was, a Democratic talking down to us about all of this, which I presume is simply a reflection of Terry McAuliffe's big election gaffe of implying that the parents shouldn't have as much say about what goes on in the schools as parents think they should have. Huge mistake, motivated people to vote against him, and that's why he lost.
Right. The implication was that Terry McAuliffe then followed it up with a barnstorming tour telling people that they didn't matter, which didn't happen. But I felt that way because
but it was still a mistake, and his opponents cleverly used it. And so if you're going to interview white suburban Virginia parents about the schools,
Yes.
And they say that CRT didn't matter. That's one thing. If you interview black suburban voters about what was going on in the schools, you might get a different, perspective.
Right. But why would you do that?
But why would you do that exactly? They don't get interviewed, nor are the people doing the interview anything but white women.
Right, that's true too. Well, we have to we know who we're going to interview.
Dana Bash
we want to
thinks
make
is more
them
important
comfortable.
than anything else, as you know.
Yeah, that's a huge, shortcoming. But
Soldat O'Brien called that out this morning. So again, but the thermostatic response is probably the best explanation for what's going on here, and the fact that the Democrat won in New Jersey is actually pretty remarkable.
Right,
in some cases more remarkable than that Terry McAuliffe lost.
And that caught me by surprise when people were saying, well, this is the first time in 40 years that a Democratic governor had won a second term, reelected to a second term. And I thought, that seems so odd. I really can't believe that that's the case. And that's a great argument for this thermostatic theory, is that, despite all perceptions, this is the pattern. So, this might be what explains it. I mean, really, honestly, I would never have guessed if you'd asked me, when was the last time a Democratic governor, incumbent, won re-election in New Jersey? I don't know. Last time? The time before that, perhaps? Was it a problem? I didn't even realize that was an issue. But now thinking back on it, yeah. I mean, I lived there for a while, and it never occurred to me, though, that this was a huge problem of re-electing Democratic governors. It was just a series of weird one-offs, things that went wrong in the election. That they analyzed to death, but never actually told me, it's been quite some time since that happened. I don't know who the last one was. Brendan Byrne, maybe? I lived in New Jersey at that time. Now you know how old I am.
Right. There you go.
But Brendan Byrne Arena, probably.
Right.
Huh.
So, that joke is going around the internet right now, by the way.
What is that?
Oh, you walk into a liquor store and the guy behind the counter says, you need to show me some sort of proof of age. and look, I have a whip inflation now button. Okay, fine. You pass.
You did it.
My contribution to that was, you need to show me something that is proof of age. And I said, well, here's my Boston bumper sticker that says, Jesus saves and Esposito puts in the rebound. It's okay, you passed, you're old enough.
It seems that they would.
So if you remember Brendan Byrne Arena, and in fact remember who Brendan Byrne was,
right?
Good for you.
There you go. And I wonder if that's the last one. I'll look it up. I won't waste any more of your time.
There's a tunnel in New York City that goes to Brooklyn that's named after Hugh Carey.
Wow. See?
Nobody calls it. It's the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel.
No, okay.
They name these things all the time after politicians, but nobody really thinks of it as that. Anyway, getting back to thermostatic response here.
Yes, right. That stuff. Go on, please.
Okay. When Democrats are in power, for example, the public infers that we're spending too little on defense and taxes are too high. That's an inference requiring only a basic understanding of ideologic differences, and rather than a transparent reflection of genuine attitude, thermostatic shifts are relative to prevailing political context. In other words, if the public shifts their concern about crime, it isn't because the people answering the surveys have shifted their concerns about crime. I'm more concerned about crime. Why? Well, because there was just a Black Lives Matter thing.
Yes, okay.
Are you really more concerned about crime than you were 2 months ago? What about immigration? Well, they're caravans. Well, really? I mean, are you concerned about it like a year later, like Ed Gillespie lost, and you're still concerned about caravans? Well, it depends who's in power.
Yeah.
Right? So the hallmark is cyclically rising and falling trends tied to national politics. So on the one hand, it's all superficial. If rising crime is a concern, as many conservative columnists will post in every survey, look at this survey showing crime is an issue. Democrats are weak on crime. Right? It's because Democrats are in power. It's not because people's opinions are changing about crime. But superficial though that may be, it's still real, and people vote according to how they feel, not their analysis of the issue that I carefully did with Joe Rogan and Aaron Rodgers, because they're really good at analysis. It's this is how I feel, and therefore this is how I'm going to vote. And so Democrats have to be aware of that and take steps. And that's why Terry McAuliffe losing on education was a thing, because he didn't really counter it.
Nah.
Not effectively.
Sigh. All right.
Yes.
Ugh. I don't know.
Ugh. I mean, we don't like it, but that's what happened.
Yeah. I know. I don't like it. You mind if I say so? No?
A week later, I still didn't like it.
Yeah. I looked twice.
All right. Well, this will cheer you up. Josh Barrow noted Commonwealths ranked by how eager elected officials are to talk about the fact that they are a Commonwealth, actually. Right? Massachusetts, number 1, of course. Pennsylvania, Kentucky, and Virginia, 4th. They're all Commonwealths. And we know the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and the others are states. Too bad.
Yeah, well, right. I get used to it here. But, I don't ever hear people, well, what do I hear that people
having lived in
Kentucky
Massachusetts,
say?
it is the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Nobody refers to it as the state of Massachusetts. Nobody.
Well, it's a big faux pas. We know that. And it's really quite annoying. Especially when, I was saying it the other day, saying, what will happen? I was wondering if we would ever have an Idaho problem here as between our incoming governor and lieutenant governor. If Youngkin were to leave Virginia on some trip or another, would Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears take the opportunity to issue any sort of interesting executive orders? But I was trying to say, well, when he travels out of state, and then I had to stop because would people say the governor's out of Commonwealth today? Like, you can say out of state, but you would have to say out of the Commonwealth. But what a pain in the ass, quite honestly. I can't believe people will use it then.
Right. So Dan Friedman from, where is he from? Mother Jones, I think. Biden has now done 2 big things Trump wanted to: passed a bipartisan infrastructure bill and gotten out of Afghanistan. I don't think a lot of people will spin it that way, but that's what happened.
Yeah, all right. Okay. I mean, it's true.
You know, and a lot of stuff is going to happen. Now, as far as the reconciliation bill, maybe we'll spend more time about that on Wednesday. Lydia DePilla put together a lovely tweet storm about all the stuff that's in it. U.S. Forest Service, $100 million for maintenance of trails on the National Forest System land, plus special access to underserved groups. Expected stuff about child care, elder care, workforce development. A climate conservation corps, $6.9 billion. A couple of billion for replacing super polluting heavy-duty vehicles with cleaner ones. Again, there's the electric charging stuff that's in the other bill, the infrastructure bill. $7 billion for a zero emissions, whatever you need slush fund in a best possible way. EPA gets $5 million to hold corporations accountable to their greenwashy climate action commitments with stiff fines. $95 million for composting. Building codes better. Just to give you an idea of what's in this thing that they're going to debate, I guess, in a week. A mandate to study and regulate nurse staffing ratios in skilled nursing facilities, which is a big priority of national nurses. Okay, billions for public health infrastructure with a heavy emphasis on rural underserved areas, including $2 billion for the National Health Service Corps and $10.5 billion for rural nursing schools. Right, $1.3 billion for beefing up pandemic response capacity, like national strategic stockpile, domestic manufacturing of critical drugs and PPE. Again, important stuff. $50 million for doulas to help birthing. $5 billion for the Commerce Department to study and strengthen manufacturing supply chains.
Okay.
Right. FTC gets Privacy Bureau to address identity theft, data breaches. Listing a laundry list of things that's in there may seem boring, but I'm just telling you, there's a lot of good stuff in there, just like there's a lot of good stuff in the infrastructure bill. So for either side to say, well, our bill's the important one and your bill not so much, there's great stuff in both. And the progressives got about as much as they could in tying the two together. The bilateral infrastructure bill, the BIF to BIB to BFD thing, was in fact passed. Biden will sign it next week when everybody's back from the Senate break, and everybody will get credit. And next week will also be, the real push to pass infrastructure and then following it with reconciliation in some form. And as we talked about at the beginning of the show, then it goes to the Senate and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. All right.
But that's my summary for today. That's what's going on.
Plenty in there for the rurals who hate the people who passed it, but whatever. You know how we do things. We're very fair to people, and even when they want to kill us.
All right. So here are the top 10 responses in today's USA Today Suffolk poll about what people want the Democrats to do, and keep in mind the thermostatic response.
All right, go do these things. Ready?
Top 10 response. 1, resign, retire, or quit.
Oh.
For Biden. Okay. Number 2, economy jobs 11. 3, unite the country 8. Immigration border control 8%. COVID mandate 6. COVID is dropping in terms of what people think is important. Infrastructure bill 5. Inflation 4. So inflation is not the driving thing here. Healthcare 3. Climate change 3. Bipartisanship 3. Those are the top 10 things. So if you're going to turn around and say, well, what does the public really want? Well, Democrats don't want Republicans in power, and Republicans don't want Democrats in power. Other than that, it's the usual laundry list.
Weird thing to even
I didn't see crime on there. Oh. And these were open-ended responses.
Yeah. Well, they view crime as that was the top response they give. You need to resign because of all your crime.
Yeah. Focus on the economy has grown as concern about COVID has eased. Those who mention jobs, inflation, or taxes total 16%. Social programs like healthcare, education, or the progressive agenda generally totaled 7.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because does that mean social programs aren't as important as jobs and inflation or taxes? The pundits will look at that and say, sure. In fact, some of that is thermostatic response. Put a Republican in power, and social programs concern becomes more important.
Yeah.
And jobs, inflation, or taxes become less important. So, again, that's why I focused on that thermostatic response before telling you about what the poll response was.
That's interesting. It's a good thing to keep in mind. It helps explain a lot of weird phenomena.
You should be poll-driven. Why?
Yeah. Well,
that would mean to get my issues at the top of the list, I'd have to be out of power.
Yes. That doesn't work out all that well for you, usually.
All right. I'll leave you with that. That's like an interesting thought.
Yeah. I can appreciate it. Thanks very much. Okay, and we'll have to wait until Wednesday for more of your interesting thoughts, I guess. Tomorrow will be Joan's interesting thoughts. So it's a thermostatic response, right? Everybody says, I've heard Greg's interesting thoughts. It's time to swing the other way and then back again. Interesting. I appreciate your describing it for us. Thanks, and we'll talk to you on Wednesday. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Net Roots Radio. What do we do with our next hour? The next hour, I'm going to read you the table of contents of the infrastructure bill. It has a title, by the way, Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. But it looks like during the voting, they might have used a different title for it. And I called it out earlier, and now I've closed all those windows, and I think they were calling it, I don't know, Invest in America Act. There it is. Yeah, the Invest in America Act. Okay. So this was originally titled oh my gosh, they tried to make an acronym out of it. Ready? The Investing in a New Vision, INV, for the Environment and Surface Transportation in America Act, or the Invest in America Act. I hate that stuff. It's so bad. That's not the worst acronym I've ever heard, but as you know, I'm something of an aficionado of these bad acronyms, and I can't remember any of the really egregious ones lately. But, we want to promote investing in America. That's the idea of it. Why are you spending so much money? You're going to something, blah, 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 the economy, right? It doesn't really work that way, but okay, I get we're investing in America. How so? Well, duh. But no, we got to make up an acronym to show you. We're investing in America because the name of the bill is Invest in America. Why you can't just name it the Invest in America Act and leave it at that? Like, what are you doing here? Investing in America? Yes. Well, okay. No argument there. But, not only are we investing in America, but we have made up an acronym that spells invest. And let me take a look at that again. So, okay, yes, maybe also points off in your acronym if you're trying to spell invest in America and the I stands for invest, like, you're wasting your time after that, dude. It's done. You've said invest. You've named the bill Investing in a New Vision for the Environment and Surface Transportation. Get it? Invest. Yes, but the first word was invest. Why not just Investing in America Act? And the answer is, I don't know. This is just the way we've done it before. Investing, like increasing something, blah, blah, blah. I understand why you have to get around to, well, I don't know. For whatever reason, we named it increasing something, but it's supposed to spell invest. Yeah, does it even count as an acronym if I in invest stands for invest? I don't know. We're going to have a talk about this with staffers. Anyway, so as I mentioned to you, the bill is enormous, and it's got lots of parts. And a lot of them are things you probably would never have thought to even include in here. Let's see, there are 6 versions of the bill, obviously. Which one do we really want? Yeah, all right. The enrolled bill that they just dealt with. So, like I said, there's all sorts of things. Really, the only thing we would have time for is to read off the top lines. But just to give you some sense of what's in here, right? There's a whole, obviously, surface transportation section. That is Division A of the bill. It's, like an outline, it has different sections, right, and Roman numerals and letters and things like this. Division A deals with surface transportation. Division A has in it titles, one, how many titles have they got? You got one title, 2, title 3, title 4, and then that's it. Then we get this Division B, which is something else, believe it or not, but also has to do with surface transportation, just to confuse you. But you see, so you see how these things are organized. Division A, surface transportation, under which we have Title I, federal aid for highways, under which we have Subtitle A, authorizations and programs. There's all kinds of fun stuff in here. There's the authorization of appropriations, which has to come first and usually comes in a separate bill, but instead we packed it right in here, and we'll throw them some money later in the appropriations bills. Authorization of appropriations, obligation ceiling, definitions, apportionment, boring stuff, right? National Highway Performance Program, the emergency relief that people need, federal share that's payable, railway highway grade crossings. That's apparently a big deal in this bill, the elimination of these railroad crossings on the roads and trying to undo these things or make them safer or build overpasses where possible to avoid, tragic collisions, how this stuff goes. Surface Transportation Block Grant Program. There's one in there, of course. Nationally significant freight and highway projects. Highway Safety Improvement Program. Federal Lands Transportation Program. Federal Lands Access Program. National Highway Freight Program. Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Improvement Program. And there's a whole thing here for an Alaska highway, which I don't even know anything about, but occupies the entirety of Section 11116. Just to give you some idea of how many freaking sections there are in this thing, too. So, by the way, yes, all of Title I, Subtitle A will be Section 111. So it doesn't start with Section 1. It starts with, in this title. There is a Section 1. Section 1 is just the title of the bill and a table of contents, which I'm reading to you now. I'm reading you just Section 1. Anyway, you get the idea how many crazy things are in here. There's more. We're only in Subtitle A. Bridge Investment Program. You knew that had to come in here, right? But that's got its own section. Tolls, toll roads, bridges, tunnels, and ferries. Safe routes to school. Highway use tax evasion projects. Wow, I don't even know what that's about. Construction of ferry boats and ferry terminal facilities. Vulnerable road user research. Who knew? Wildlife crossing safety. I saw a little bit of the investment in that in New Jersey on Route 78. Consolidation of programs. Can you believe that? This is after where there's a whole section about consolidating programs. Meanwhile, there's 50,000 programs in there. GAO report, Territorial and Puerto Rico Highway Program. Thankfully, they've got their own section here. Nationally significant federal lands and tribal projects program, as far as the nationally insignificant ones, I guess. Tribal high priority projects program, standards for all of this stuff embodied in a different section. Public transportation, reservation of certain funds, rural surface transportation grant program, bicycle transportation and pedestrian walkways, recreational trails program, updates to manual on uniform traffic control devices. And that's just subtitle A, because subtitle B is coming next. By the way, those are sections numbered 112. Get it? See how this works? Transportation planning, fiscal constraint on long-range transportation plans. By the way, subtitle B is planning and performance management. Let's see, what else? State human capital plans. Okay. Prioritization process pilot program. Travel demand data and modeling. Increasing safe and accessible transportation options. All under subtitle B. Are you ready for subtitle C? Project delivery and process improvement. That's probably not where at this point we skip, right? And say, all right, well, that's probably not where the charging stations are. What is in there? If you care to know, all the things start with section number 113. You're beginning to catch on now. Codification of one federal decision. I don't even know what that means. Like, that's capitalized. One federal decision. I mean, I'm tempted to look, but you're not, right? Work zone process reviews, transportation management plans, intelligent transportation systems. All of this stuff, probably not the plug-in stuff. Subtitle D is about climate change. All the sections beginning with 114. There's not that much in here. Obviously, most of that ended up being put in the reconciliation bill instead. But there is stuff here. What do we have that addresses climate change in this bill? Grants for charging and fueling infrastructure. Ta-da! Section 11401. Better write it down because you never know when you're going to lose your place here. Also, reduction of truck emissions at port facilities. I guess that's a big problem. Carbon reduction program. I think we all know about that. In terms of it being a problem. Congestion relief program, again. Promoting resilient operations for transportation. Efficient and cost-saving transportation program. Do you get the sense, when I read a name like that and you say, what now? That's probably a sign that you're dealing with another acronym. And you are. Ready? Promoting resilient operations, sounds good, for transformative, efficient, and cost-saving transportation. Protect. The Protect program, ladies and gentlemen. The Promoting Resilient Operations for Transformative, Efficient, and Cost-Saving Transportation. Protect. Why protect? I don't know. Because we couldn't spell traffic or big truck or anything like that. I don't know. But there we go. We're protecting ourselves from something. Somebody thought that was a good idea. Somebody had written a bill, basically, for the Protect program and couldn't get it passed on its own, freestanding, and inserted it into subtitle D of the big-ass infrastructure bill, and said, all right, there's also a healthy streets program, which, by the way, you'll notice it's just healthy streets. They didn't try to invent healthy out of some wording. Hey, our streets really ought to be lighted well and totally have yams. I don't know. The reason that they didn't try to invent an acronym, it would be stupid. You could just name your bill what you want. Anyway, so section 11401, like, we'd have to scroll forever to try to find it, but let's do that. Let's scroll and see how far we can get in figuring this. Oh, I've scrolled past it. I'm in section 23013 already. This is a big bill. Amendments to regulations relating to transportation of household goods in interstate commerce. Oh, we've gone too far. Let's see. Sometimes the problem is you got to keep scrolling for a while just to see a section number. All right, we're still in the 2300s here. Here we are, section 12001. Now we can slowly make our way down to try and find the text for, what were we looking for? 1400. I wrote it down. Now where did I write it? There it is. I'll circle it so I can find it. 11401. Still working on it. This is why it takes people a long time to read the bill. Even if they know what parts they want to read, it takes 25 minutes to find the section. I'm in the 1300s now. Oh, am I in 113 or am I in 130? Okay, so we got to scroll back even further and then stop and then look. All right, I'm in the 112s. All right. Boy, this takes forever. Isn't this boring? Wouldn't you like to be a legislator? You see why nobody takes this job? You get yelled at. Here we are. We're in the 113s, subtitle C. Keep going. Some of these sections are shorter than the titles of what's in there, especially when they try to make up acronyms. All right. 113 still. Still going. It's also not that easy to see very quickly. They don't space things out very nicely and make it easy to find when you've moved into a new subtitle. And sometimes it's all confusing because some of the language in the subtitle is changing the text of already existing legislation. And so suddenly the numbers change, but it's really just them saying, well, we're changing this section of this already existing. Well, here we are, though. Climate change, grants for charging and fueling infrastructure. Let's find out how they do this. We know what the purpose is, obviously, but in case you want to hear it stated formally. Let's say you were thinking of running for Congress and you say, I would like to write bills like this. You wouldn't, but here's what you'd have to do. And yeah, you can have staff do this. The purpose of this section is to establish a grant program to strategically deploy publicly accessible electric vehicle charging infrastructure, hydrogen fueling infrastructure, propane fueling infrastructure, and natural gas fueling infrastructure along designated alternative fuel corridors or in certain other locations that will be accessible to all drivers of electric vehicles, hydrogen vehicles, you got any of those? Propane vehicles, which I think are like forklifts if you're driving across the country in a forklift, and natural gas vehicles. Grant program. Section 151 of Title 23 U.S. Code is amended. 1. In subsection A. How is it amended in subsection A? Well, in subsection A, we will want you to A. Strike not later than 1 year after the date of enactment of the FAST Act, an acronym all by itself, the Secretary shall, strike all of that, and instead insert that the Secretary shall periodically do something. What? I don't know. B, strike to improve the mobility and insert to support changes in the transportation sector that help achieve a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and improve the mobility, close quote. So you see what they're doing here. They're editing an existing law. 23 U.S. Code Section 151. I mean, you can go look that up. It's annoying. But if you want to have any idea of what they're actually doing, line by line, this is actually kind of how you have to do it, which is why, 1, most people have no idea about what's going on, and 2, lobbyists and their staff are very highly paid. They do this stuff that nobody else wants to, even if they're doing it on your behalf. If you're paying for lobbyists for environmental causes, somebody has to do this work. 23 U.S. Code 151. The National Electric Vehicle Charging and Hydrogen, Propane, and Natural Gas Fueling Corridors thing, part of the law. In other words, this stuff already existed, and they are amending it, though it's getting sold as this is the first time we're doing anything about it. Then we have this new program, and in the end, it may end up being a new program because I don't know what fueling corridors are really about, but I guess maybe as an initial foray into this, they said, well, we'll put them along interstate highways, And then people said, what if you're not driving on an interstate highway, but you still want to drive one of these vehicles? Now we'll expand them beyond all of this. Anyway, so there's an existing grant program that they are amending with this section, I guess with instructions to who, we'll find out at some point, to make other places off of the corridors eligible for such grants. I assume what's going on here. We'll skim the rest of this here. So there's a grant program. It's you'll find it in section or Title 23 U.S. Code Section 151. They're amending it to give the Secretary of Transportation, presumably, some new instructions. So that's where it goes to. In subsection B2, what else happens here? Previously designated by the Federal Highway Administration. Okay, so all of this is just amendments to the existing law. I think the whole thing may be. Yeah, this is actually quite wordy. This is one of the longer sections, as you might imagine. But yeah, essentially you are applying for grants to the Secretary of, presumably, Transportation for all of this. It does say that the Secretary, it just says Secretary, and somewhere earlier in 23 U.S. Code Section 150, I presume, it might say which Secretary it is, probably the Secretary of Transportation. And that will surprise no one. So my guess is, without spending the rest of the show reading about what's being amended, is that the Secretary of Transportation will promulgate regulations for this grant program and decide what sorts of applicants will be eligible for these grants and hand them out accordingly. And it doesn't matter that the Congress hasn't necessarily defined exactly how it's going to happen. Maybe they don't even think they're the best ones to do it. They'll instead leave it to the Secretary, although I do see in the existing law there's some mention of the Secretary, after consultation with the Administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, will determine the parameters of these projects. So I guess that's your answer. We'd be here forever if Congress were trying to hammer out the exact details of what street corner are they going to put this electric charging station on, right? They'd never get a bill passed. This is delegation of authority to the bureaucratic apparatus of the Secretary of Transportation. Somebody else will be the one in charge of trying to figure out what corners these things are going to go on. And it'll go along that the way it usually goes. The Transportation Department bureaucracy will take the money, divvy it up, and decide how to distribute it. A grant program, it could be block grants to the states. They'll have rules that if we give you the money as a block grant to the state has to, by some date certain, have a program in place for how it's going to distribute the money down to the county or municipal level, or whether it's going to make grants directly to companies that will construct these charging stations, et cetera, et cetera. They'll have all sorts of rules about who is and isn't eligible to receive grant funding for all of this. I don't know how loose or tightly they'll control things, but yeah, eventually you'll start to hear complaints about it. Like, for instance, what if ExxonMobil says we're the ones most clearly, capable of constructing these additional charging stations. We have gas stations all across the country, and we can just, apparently they're in reasonable enough spots that people can reach them to travel across the country in gas-powered vehicles. Suppose we install these things at our stations because we don't want to lose business, right? We want to be involved in the transportation industry, whatever it is. It could be as simple as, well, if we built these things separate and we say gave grants to Tesla and other manufacturers of electric cars to build their own charging stations, then, well, you're presumably paving over new areas and putting up new charging stations and probably in close proximity to the gas stations anyway. You might wonder, why does ExxonMobil care about, particularly if the charging was free, why do they care about bringing in electric vehicle drivers when they can't sell them any gasoline? And it might be as simple as, well, who's going to sell them donut gems and Diet Coke, right? Is every electric vehicle station going to have its own, Quickie Mart? Or should you use ours, which already exist? Is it a waste of time? Will they sell anything but granola? We're concerned about these things. We want regular people who don't necessarily like granola and kale chips, but who might be interested in driving an electric vehicle, to be able to get powdered donuts, little tiny powdered donuts. This is very important to America. If it wasn't, it wouldn't be the case that there were tiny powdered donuts everywhere you went. Maybe you never eat them, but America apparently runs on the tiny powdered donuts, and we never find out what happens to the tiny powdered donuts that pass their expiration date and what happens to them. But it's a tragedy, and for just 10 cents a day, you can sponsor a tiny powdered donut to meet its destiny. I will eat it on the air, I guess, if you'll just sponsor the show. Go to patreon.com/KagroX. For just 10 cents a day, whatever that adds up to over the course of a year. Just give me that money and I will go buy the tiny, unfortunate donuts that don't get to otherwise meet their destiny. You get the idea of what the level of detail we're dealing with here. This has nothing to do with the bill, but that's how they'll deal with it. They will hand it over to the Department of Transportation, who will write the grant guidelines. Who's eligible, who's not eligible. You might protest. No, I don't want my anti-fossil fuel money going into the hands of giant fossil fuel run, corporations who've made their money by destroying the earth. But on the other hand, maybe it's a good idea to say, well, you're so concerned how many jobs will be lost in your industry if we promote electric vehicle use instead. But what if there was a way to encourage electric vehicle use in a way that you wouldn't lose all of those jobs, or we wouldn't render your existing infrastructure useless or pointless or duplicative for that matter? There's, I'm sure, a good case to be made for co-locating those things with traditional fossil fuel filling stations or whatever. I don't know whether they're going to be able to handle all the hydrogen and propane and natural gas alongside them, but they've proven pretty flexible so far. And a lot of them already do have electric charging stations, but usually paid for by the companies. Then I guess there's the possibility the transportation department could say, we will fund these things by giving grants to the manufacturers of electric vehicles to put their own stations up. But I don't know whether, does a Tesla plug not work on anything else but a Tesla? Probably. Is it also the case that an electric vehicle made by Chevy can't, I don't know whether it can be charged at the same station as an electric Ford or not, but I guess we'll find out at some point. Look, Scott Anderson texts me that Tesla currently has such plans. I guess they anticipated a program like this, but says they plan to have stores and restaurants at their charging stations, and it's illustrated with a picture here of a 7-Eleven branded charging station. What would we call such a thing? A charging station. We would have come up with an acronym. Clearly would be the best thing for this. What am I reading here? CNET.com. 7-Eleven is opening 500 electric vehicle charging ports by the end of 2022, as if we needed more of an excuse to drink coffee from 7-Eleven, says Kyle Hyatt, the author of this piece, assuming he's responsible for the headlines and subheaders. So interesting. It wasn't that long ago that people's biggest fear about owning an electric car was not having anywhere to charge it while they were on the go. That concern has mostly been alleviated thanks to several nationwide brand-agnostic charging stations like EVgo and Electrify America. But this being America, more is always better, so there's a new player entering the EV charging game, and it's 7-Eleven. Yes, that's 7-Eleven with the questionable hot case foods and the grumpy employees and the menthol cigarettes. The convenience store chain announced Tuesday that it will be placing 500 electric vehicle charger ports at 250 stores in the U.S. and Canada by the end of 2022. That's not a whole lot, but it's a difference. And interesting, too. And I guess this maybe not in... Is it in this article? Maybe not in this article. I don't know. But as I mentioned, Scott says that Tesla has its own plans. I mean, I guess if they have plans to be able to... same guy can launch you into space. I'm pretty sure he can probably bring the tiny donuts to bear if necessary. Maybe even some sort of Amazon Prime-like service where you can order your donuts ahead of time and have them delivered just in time to the filling station you're headed to, which you won't even have to tell them which one you're headed to because the self-driving car will bring you there. I don't know how they'll integrate all of this stuff, but I imagine more opportunities to sell more stuff to people will not elude Elon Musk, even if everything else has. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I was just putting the article away in Pocket, but now I realize that. So, Scott, do I have to send you that article so that you can include it in the roundup, or do you already have it now? I don't know. What's the protocol? I'm going to put it in the roundup. During the break, I'm reminded by my helpful production staff here in the building that we've heard a story from Norwegian colleagues. Did you know I had more? I don't have any Norwegian colleagues. She does. However, this was an interesting story, and I guess really tells you how much is at stake. I mean, this is an extraordinarily important program, probably, to a lot of people, and it's probably going to shape a lot more than we think. It's not just this stupid little Section 11401 of this giant bill. How so? She tells me a story that I could relate to you, from what I remember of it, but I went searching for a story that was published that would establish the same thing, so I'd have something to point to and link to. And here's the basics of it. In Fast Company, which I don't know how their Norway coverage is, but they seem to be doing a good job on this. That is to say, they've reported what I heard, so they're accurate, right? Anyway, here is an article, fairly recent, right? How do numbers work again? October 11th, 2021. That's what 10/11/21 means. 90% of new cars sold in Norway are now electric or plug-in hybrids. There is that. But what we've learned here, I mean, look, that's Norway. They're into this stuff, right? That's great. But even better from a business perspective is that, I don't know, what was it? Would you say 90? There's an overwhelming majority of the electric vehicles sold in Norway. 90% of all vehicles are electric, and I don't know, maybe 90% of all electrics turn out to be Teslas. Why? Do they love Elon Musk? Maybe. Do they all think they'll be launched into space? Do they think the donut thing is going to come to bear? No. The issue is the Norwegians, being environmentally conscious types, said we will also fund infrastructure. We're gonna have a national program, I guess, of filling out electric vehicle charging station network nationwide so that everybody can go and buy electric cars and not have any worries about this stuff. And it's working very well to move people to electrics. But Tesla, on its own, said, we too will participate in this, and we're going to build exclusively Tesla stations. I don't know about the plug shape and whether you can use this, that, and the other thing. Apparently that also is in the works, by the way, for Tesla. But what Tesla did was they said, we're going to build our own stations, and for Tesla owners, charging the electricity will be free at Tesla stations. The government stations, of course, they're government. They're not going to just give everything away for free, right? So, the government-sponsored station, or the stations sponsored by, built by, whether in partnership with private industry or not, I don't know. They're there. You can charge your vehicle, but, come on, 90% of the cars being purchased these days are electric. Are we going to just give away fuel for free? Not at the government ones, no. So they don't. So in other words, if you want to buy an electric vehicle, and you say, I hate Elon Musk, I'm not going to buy a Tesla. You are looking at a lifetime of paying to charge your electric vehicle at these charging stations around the country. If you can get over your hatred of Elon Musk, or maybe you don't have any at all to begin with, you're that kind of person, and you buy a Tesla, you're looking at free charging forever, I guess. I don't know. I mean, as long as Elon Musk says yes, I guess it's another thing, right? How much faith do you have in Elon Musk? You've bought the Tesla, you're charging for free, and then one day he says, I would like to have another $1 trillion. Now you got to pay for it, right? And you say, well, what? To hell with that? I'm going to get rid of my car? Or, I guess you just... I thought it was going to be free. I felt like that was a commitment. And he says, I don't know you. I didn't commit to anything for you. You're going to have to pay now. Probably you're going to have to start paying. There's no way around it. So I don't know. I think that's pretty interesting. So I grabbed this article thinking it was going to be about 90% of the electric vehicles being Teslas, because that's what I was looking for. But instead, it's about 90% of the vehicles being electric. Anyway, so for now, it remains anecdotal evidence of how coming up with a slightly different policy on electric charging can change the market dramatically. So, I don't know. Maybe if it's just down to it here in the United States of Tesla charging stations stand separate and apart from gas stations. And I could see them wanting to do it that way, just to sort of remind you that driving a Tesla is an entirely different experience, totally different from regular old fossil fuel powered cars. I can't say fossil fueled cars because that's just too awkward. And so they may even have, we're going to have our own upscale snack places at this stuff. And it might have powdered donuts, but the thing is, they will levitate. I don't know. I'm not certain how they would differentiate, but it could be something like that, or it's a drive-through type thing, and you can order with the screen while the car is self-driving on the highway. You can select from the menu of the next upcoming station and program your car to drive to it, and you drive through, and it pops the trunk and loads the trunk automatically. There's no employees. It's an automat, and it just pneumatically fires a tube full of powdered donuts into the trunk, or through a feeding tube that's exclusively an add-on accessory for your Tesla that they can fire them directly into the tube, and it goes right into your mouth without having to roll down the window. I don't know. They could come up with something like that. Or, the players in the game could decide, the current players in the game could decide to just say, well, we'll provide these charging stations here at our gas station, and then people will come in and use our Tiger Mart to buy their powdered donuts or something like this. I've got some more information here from the production staff. Tesla may open its superchargers to other electric vehicles, starting in Scandinavia. That was actually the first couple hits of my Google search, was that all the big news was Tesla saying we might open it up to everybody here. What do I have? I'm looking at car and driver. Let me park this in pocket as well. Tesla.
Gives you some background on it.
Some background. Oh, okay. So that'll help with figuring out why it was working in Norway. Oh, the connectors. Okay, thank you. Tesla may open its superchargers to other electric vehicles, EVs, starting in Scandinavia. Why not here? Because there they have 90% of the cars on the road are electric. Long a brand exclusive perk for Tesla owners only. The fast chargers, they're faster than other ones too. Great. May be on the verge of wider availability. And I do have another question about that. Like, is it an exclusive thing? Like, are there ever lines to charge up?
Yes, but not at Tesla.
But not at Tesla because they have their own thing, right? Okay, and they're faster, right? And donuts. They might not have any donuts. No promises on the donuts. Let's see. They do. Car and Driver goes with bullet points on this too. Since early in its history, Tesla has made its supercharger charging stations a point of pride, offering Tesla drivers easy access to thousands of fast charging stations for people taking road trips. But these stations can only be used by Tesla electric vehicles, something that the Norwegian government wants to change if it's going to pony up public money for the automaker to build more in the country. So I guess Tesla might have footed the bill for the first round, and now they want to be paid by the government to make more. But the government says if you're going to make more, you're going to have to allow everybody to charge there, or at least some other people to charge there. Government documents show that a small number, maybe 5, of the superchargers will be open to all EVs by the third quarter of 2022. So it's a slow-moving process. I guess Tesla's not that nimble when they don't want to be. So that's interesting, too. There's discussion about opening up the stations in Germany, too, but nothing as specific as in Scandinavia, where they'll have 5 by next year. The Tesla Supercharger network is a prominent public display dotted around the world, proving that the company supports its drivers. That's the way you're supposed to view it. As useful as these stations are for Model S, Model 3, and Model Y owners, is that all the models, or are they saying that there are some you can't do this with? The DC fast charging stations are proprietary, which renders them unusable by other electric vehicles. The company's lower power level 2 destination charging stations can be used by non-Tesla EV drivers, but they take a lot longer than supercharging, which is why it's news that this paradigm might be about to shift in a way that makes it easier for non-Teslas to access the supercharger network, at least in limited areas. Teslarati, I'm not even certain what that is, reports that Tesla and the Norwegian government are discussing a requirement that supercharger stations that were built or are being built using public funds must be available to all EV drivers. I would have hammered that out beforehand. The Norwegian government, which has spent millions on promoting EV sales and infrastructure over the last decade plus, has come to an agreement where Tesla will open a small number of publicly funded superchargers to other EVs by the third quarter of 2022 in order to qualify for a charging station subsidy. Tesla's website lists more than 100 supercharger stations in operation or coming soon in Norway, and the company operates around 2,500 stations with more than 25,000 superchargers around the world. Norwegian government documents obtained and translated by Teslarati lay out the deal. They got to translate it, but it does give you the opportunity to speak in a mock Norwegian accent, right? Tesla applied to expand 5 faster charging stations. That's more Swedish chef than anything else, I guess. But anyway, Tesla's charging stations today are just available for Tesla cars. They actually speak beautifully unaccented, really, English in most of Norway. We think of as unaccented. You can tell they're Norwegian, but they do a fantastic job educating the kids in English. The type of infrastructure is then only open for use by one group and not for the general public. Otherwise, in the application, Tesla describes the relevant charging stations will nevertheless become publicly available from the third quarter of 2022. The administration, that is the Norwegian administration, considers that the charging stations for which benefits have been applied for will be qualified under the scheme, provided that the benefits be paid out after... I got to stop this. Quite honestly, nothing could be worse than reading government regulations translated from another language into English. But you get the idea? Let's see, down at the bottom here, Tesla CEO Elon Musk has talked about opening up the supercharger stations for many years. Last December, for example, Musk said on Twitter that non-Tesla electric vehicles are using the supercharger network, but in a low-key way. Tesla superchargers are being made accessible to other electric cars, he wrote at the time. And I guess that's it, because it was just Twitter. So, all right. Not what I intended to spend all of this time on, but, I let Greg sometimes change the direction of the show. And, this is of some interest. We want to figure out what the hell was this big bill all about. And we choose one example and dive way too far into trying to figure out exactly what became of it. Okay. Other things that I had packed away to discuss from the weekend. Gosh, there's a lot, but of course we didn't get to any of them. Let's see. Update on the University of Florida situation. I'll give you that, and just a quick hit from the Hill to give you the basics of it. The University of Florida to allow professors now to testify in voting rights case after backlash. So good job on the backlash, everybody. It actually changed things, or at least appears to have changed things. Jordan Williams reporting for the Hill. University of Florida said Friday that it will allow professors to testify in a voting rights lawsuit against the state, reversing its position following a wave of public backlash. So there you go. Education is the new focus of everything, and Democrats have now brought their backlash and anger to bear and changed policy, but there was no election intervening. We haven't been able to capitalize on it as an election issue yet, but there you have it. It does work. Reports previously emerged that the school was barring professors from giving testimony due to a conflict of interest. In a message to the campus, UF President W. Kent Fuchs, is that right? Fuchs, or how else would you pronounce it? Fuchs. I'm going to go with Fuchs on that one. Said he had asked the school's Conflicts of Interest Office to reverse decisions on recent requests from employees wishing to testify in litigation in which the state of Florida is a party. Fuchs also said the office will approve requests for testimony regardless of personal compensation, assuming the activity is on their own time without using university resources. Additionally, Fuchs announced the members of the task force that will review the school's response to employees who want to serve as expert witnesses in cases involving the state of Florida. So pretty good. That's a nice outcome. There's more detail to it. I'll provide you with the link if you want to read all the detail. But at this point, we're going to probably move around from one lightning round story to the next. Let's see. How about this from... I read it on Daily Kos the other day. Marissa Higgins reporting this one. Since education is a big issue, yada yada, we have this story. 8th grader recorded teacher's 7-minute rant about vaccines and Joe Biden, and much, much more as well. An absolutely shocking story, she reports, out of a middle school in Ventura, California, has me, Melissa, not me, but also me, thinking back to my own days as a preteen. I attended a public school, and while we were assigned debates on pre-selected issues, we weren't really supposed to talk about the big event dominating the news at the time, which at that point was invading Afghanistan. This meant, of course, that all my classmates and I wanted to know, all we wanted to know was where our teachers stood politically. I distinctly remember essentially goading my social studies teacher into admitting to our horror that he backed Bush and supported invading Afghanistan, making him perhaps the least surprised of anyone who ever taught me that I ended up working at Daily Kos decades later. I never told my teachers about that. They wouldn't have cared. I was already out like 30 years. But anyway, all of this is to say I understand teachers, like everyone, are imperfect, and I don't necessarily think all political topics should be off limits to the classroom. But this incident out of Anacapa, maybe, middle school, is so wildly inappropriate, so offensive, and downright concerning. It's not even in the same stratosphere. There being only one stratosphere, but you get the idea. A history teacher at the school was recorded ranting about Hunter Biden, of course, claiming that Biden had sex with his niece. And this means I had to straighten this out in my own reading. That is the claim being that Biden had sex with his own niece, not the teacher's niece, which I thought would have been an extraordinary connection, but might get me hot under the collar too. But hey, and also made up stuff about having child pornography on his laptop, because why not? Tell the kids about that, why don't you? The teacher topped off the diatribe by, you guessed it, bringing up Ukraine, as reported by CBS Los Angeles. They also ranted about, you also guessed this, vaccines. The teacher has not been publicly identified at the time of writing. And I understand the teacher has now been let go, but still not publicly identified. And since we're now in the business of meeting the Republicans on the culture war field of battle, I am wondering, where are the outraged parents with pitchforks and torches demanding an end to the cover-up? What about this nasty cover-up? Sure, the teacher's been terminated, maybe. How do we know for sure, unless we know who the teacher is, and why won't you give us the name? And how dare you cover up this situation? Remember, it was the cover-up that angered everybody in Loudoun County, allegedly. But now we find out that actually they were really only concerned with schools being closed, because if it worries you that we are too crazy over the alleged cover-up stuff, well, we'll back off and just say, well, it's really about masks. Oh, you also think we're crazy for being anti-science? Well, then it's just about the schools being closed and learning loss. That was my reaction to seeing the panel of suburban moms talking to CNN about their concerns about education. They've backed off to a place where they can say, well, the learning loss from having our schools closed is real, and we don't want to be dismissed for having concerns about that. Okay, but then no one was really dismissing you for having concerns about that. We were dismissing you for having concerns about critical race theory, which isn't being taught anywhere, or masks, which people ought to be wearing, or vaccines, which aren't dangerous and you should stop complaining about them. But anyway, they found a sweet spot there where they think they can sit for an interview calmly and look like non-crazy people. So anyway, I just thought that was interesting. So there you have it, happening in a blue area, but no torches, no pitchforks, no angry parents demanding an end to the cover-up, nobody threatening the lives of the school board because they won't name the teacher. I just found that kind of interesting, and one of the differences between us and them, I guess. Another subject here, this one I thought maybe we would have some discussion with Greg about on a Monday, but we had lots of other important things to do. We frequently, we usually will cover them on Monday when the Friday jobs reports come out. And Greg's not on the air on Fridays, so we'll wait for Mondays. But there were some important revisions to the job numbers from previous months, which I thought was kind of interesting, and which got a little bit of attention among the people who pay attention to these job numbers, but then was overshadowed, I guess, by the passage of the infrastructure bill, and so we didn't really hear about it come Monday. But Twitter favorite when it comes to stuff like this, Rorty-Baum, or Mike Consal, how does he pronounce his last name? I'm not sure. We know him as Rorty-Baum, but Director of Macroeconomic Analysis for the Roosevelt Institute at the moment. And like I said, a Twitter favorite, points this interesting tidbit out. The initial August jobs numbers were initially reported as 235,000 new jobs created in August, and it was looked upon as an anemic number and indicative of a lack of real economic recovery, A, under Biden, and B, post-pandemic. In fact, he says the initial August jobs numbers of 235K started a wave of economic panic in the press. Well, that number has been revised, as it turns out. Late-breaking information, as frequently is the case these days, but revised rather dramatically. It's now posted as 483,000 jobs, or as he puts it, it actually was 483,000 jobs, nearly 500,000 jobs created in August. September initially reported as 194,000, which signaled malaise on top of the economic panic of the August numbers, has now been revised to 312,000 jobs. Revisions are big in 2021, averaging 99,000 per month. The press hasn't managed it well. And he goes on to say, I get the narrative of the jobs numbers has to be determined within 5 minutes of the 8:30 a.m. announcement, right? But imagine in August, the press didn't use the 235,000 number to whip out their Jimmy Carter thesaurus, and instead correctly said that even under Delta, Biden's economy added 500,000 jobs. That seems like a different picture, doesn't it, right? The White House Council of Economic Advisors actually had a post noting, among other things, as in previous episodes of U.S. economic volatility, the magnitude of data revisions has been large. On the eve of the big summer numbers, even then, July was revised from 943,000 to over 1 million jobs. So they knew in August that they had just revised the July numbers in a huge way. And they knew also that those numbers were fairly big. And imagine, I guess, you might have maybe issued a caveat at some point. Like if you're initially bringing out a July number of almost 1 million jobs, and it eventually does get revised to over 1 million jobs created in that month, does it not, put you on notice in some way, if not shock you, or like you say, okay, well, July, almost 1 million jobs. August, 235,000. September, 194,000. Like, do you say, I bet these are going to be revised. I should probably make some mention of this because it was 1 million jobs added in July. What happens between July and August and September that makes such anemic numbers? I know you might wonder, how do you come up with numbers like that? How does it get to be so far off the mark? And I guess in these, as he says, economically volatile times, and given how unsure we are about what even constitutes the job market, and people who are looking and people who aren't looking, and people who have said, I'm not reentering the workforce because of COVID or whatever, it's got to be near impossible to get the numbers even close to right. But the bigger point here, imagine how we might perhaps have seen a different outcome, I don't know, in these midterm or off-year elections that we just had. If people had information that actually the economy is rebounding pretty well. Actually, they've been adding, 1 million jobs in July. And then even at the peak of Delta, they were adding 500,000 jobs. Things are coming back. They're actually doing pretty well. We're not actually in economic malaise. We're not actually in need of drawing parallels between Biden and Carter because the jobs numbers are completely the opposite from one another. Might that have impacted the outcome of an election? Is it the economy stupid after all? And if so, how stupid are we for voting on the wrong economy during this thing? But hey, you don't want to print anything that might influence the outcome of the election, right? You better just wait until afterwards to make these corrections. Fantastic. That worked out really well. All right. Something let's see. We practically no time for anything at all left at this point because we're running up against the end of the show. Let's see. I'll at least note there's a lot more reporting out there about the weird directions, can you believe it, that QAnon still continues to take, and an interesting profile we might have time to talk about perhaps tomorrow in Vice about meet the anti-Semitic QAnon leader who led followers to Dallas to meet JFK. If you were wondering, we knew that happened, and I didn't wonder much beyond the fact that it's like, well, it's QAnon weirdos. That's why they're in Dallas. But who told them to go to Dallas and under what pretense and why did they believe it? I was a little curious about that. And the fact that it turns out to be an anti-Semitic QAnon leader on top of all of that makes me wonder whether we ought to pay some attention to it, if only to be aware of what's coming down the pike. Last thing I'll throw in there, one quick read also from the Hill. Arizona I didn't know this was happening. Arizona defies demand that it stop using COVID-19 relief money for anti-mask schools. That does seem like an incorrect use of the funds, don't you think? Like out in Norway, they're making decent progress in saying, all right, well, if you're going to have electric charging stations paid for by the government, they have to be open to everybody. That seems to make sense. Here in the United States, we give COVID relief money to Arizona. Arizona uses it for anti-mask schools, which I guess only highlights the need for defining the rules for these electric charging stations. As Greg was saying, you want to be sure that you're going to use the money properly. Here's what they're doing in Arizona. Doug Ducey pressing forward with using federal coronavirus relief funds they go to exclusively to schools that do not have mask mandates, according to the Associated Press. Not sure in my skim whether we're talking about private schools or whether we're talking about encouraging public schools to abandon their mask policies so that they can then qualify for grant money, but probably both. The federal government saying, yeah, not exactly how you were supposed to use this money, and we may threaten your funding in the future, but they're going ahead with it. So maybe we'll read through this article, digest it, and discuss it a little bit further tomorrow and later in the week, because now, time to hand the microphone over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Coming up next, right here on Netroots Radio. And how about a little sampling of what he's got in store after this brief announcement? You know what it says.
From netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Here's a good one from down in Georgia, where Secretary of State Brett Raffensperger was called out for blaming Stacey Abrams for causing Trump's election interference. I should like to see how he gets around to that one. And, of course, as always, more news on things we didn't touch on from around the country and around the world, probably even in Norway, next.